Good evening, members, and welcome to this Overview Scrutiny Board meeting. Very special welcome to anybody that's watching this meeting online. We really appreciate you taking an interest in the activities of this board. Before we get on with the agenda, I will ask Jill Hollyoak, our Democratic Services Officer, if she would like to give us some housekeeping information for the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Just quickly to note that this meeting of the ONS board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point in the surface car park at the front of the building. And finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Could I ask you to address the agenda items 1 and 2, apologies and substitute members, please? Thank you.
Certainly. So apologies. We haven't received any apologies. I note that Councillor Felicity Rice is online, so therefore she can obviously participate, but she won't be able to vote. There are no substitute members. Item 3, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations?
Councillor Tarling.
Yes, I believe we may be discussing libraries, and my wife works for the library service. I don't think it's an interest that would necessarily exclude me from hearing the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there any more? Okay. Agenda item 4, public issues. Do we have any public issues, please, Jill?
Just to confirm, there are no public statements, questions or petitions for this meeting. Chairman, if we can just do confirmation of minutes as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Missed that one. We have minutes of 2 meetings, if I recall. Yeah. Minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of September. Members, does anybody have any comments about that, the minutes for that meeting? Okay, we'll take those as agreed. And the second one was on the 9th of October. Any comments on those minutes, please? No, okay, take those as agreed. Thank you. So, agenda item 5, responding to the best value notice progress update. I think we'll go straight to the leader and ask the leader if you would introduce this item, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a further update after Cabinet had their response to the best value notice, and the action plan which had been developed was presented to Cabinet. The action plan's been created from the internal governance review which was undertaken by the Chief Exec earlier this year, which wasn't implemented until post-election, because obviously it would have been rather a complicated time to do it, and also the external best governance review that was undertaken by DLUC. Just to give you an update, the reason that we had the governance review was it was one of the requirements when the application was made for a capitalisation directive last year. That capitalisation directive wasn't taken up in terms of the request for the funds, but part of the process was to undergo a governance review and to undergo a financial review. The outcome of that was that Leslie, can't remember her surname, Siri, thank you very much, undertook the governance review, which she started under the previous council and then paused and then came back and completed it in May, when she had the opportunity to get updates from the new direction of travel. As you know, the outcome of that the government issued a best value notice. That's becoming quite a popular method. I understand one of my favourite council, South Cambridgeshire, was issued with a best value notice last week for being innovative in their 4-day week stance, which seemed a little bit irrelevant, but it makes me feel better that we're not the only people getting best value notices. Just for clarity, the best value notice is the was the least most draconian intervention that the government could make. It doesn't require that the government are making decisions on our behalf. We retain that decision making, but we are required to report in regularly to government. So the action plan, I'm really proud of the action plan that was delivered, mainly by Graham's very swift work in pulling together the outcomes of the review he undertook, melding it with what Leslie did, and then really working very quickly over the summer to put all of the proposals in place. And you can see when we brought this in September to Cabinet, there were 7% of the 42 actions, which was 3 items that had not yet been started. There's now only 1, which I think's, you know, all credit to officers for turning that around. And in terms of complete or significantly progressing, it was 69%, it's now 79% of the action. So, you know, I do think we should pay real credit to the officers for being able to do that. The one item that is shown on the report has not yet started, was an item that wasn't actually due to be carried out until next year anyway. So that's good, June 24. That was in relation to the decision making around our council companies. The council companies, obviously, we had Future Places, that's now been closed down, brought in-house. We've obviously got Tricuro, Seascape Homes, Seascape Properties, and Seascape South, and BBML. They've all only had 1 cycle of directors meetings so far, and the interim director of corporate resources, Ian O'Donnell, is currently concluding his governance review on all of the companies. We're expecting to get the outcomes of those in the new year, so we can then establish what those in-year things would look like. In terms of the items which are still orange, so started, but you still need quite a bit of work on it, then most of them are ones that had dates going beyond here, so some into early next year. The one that's passed, that's still showing as orange, is the transformation programme, and I know that you'll be aware, Chair, and many members of this group will know that the transformation working group has now had its first meeting. The reports from that were that people felt they had more confidence that we had a plan. Whether we will be able to deliver all of the outcomes was still to be found, but actually there was a real relief that people were now getting the oversight that they wanted. The other element which I want to touch on is around the corporate plan and bringing together the MTFP, so the medium-term financial plan, and the priorities of the council. The timetable around that is that we want to bring the revised corporate plan to full council before the budget, so that it informs the budget. Because otherwise, we're not actually looking at how the priorities of the council and the spending of the council come together. So that is due to come to council in January. I have clarified that the forward plan, which is being published tomorrow, will have the update to the corporate plan, which is due to come to Cabinet in December. I think, is it December the 9th? I'm not sure whether your next scrutiny meeting is before or after that, but I would sure whether you're the 4th.
Yes, 4th
Yeah.
of December.
So that's due to go on there. I did challenge why it hadn't been on there already, because you would have thought that with something that we'd always planned to come to council in January, I would have liked to have thought it would be on the forward plan for some time, but it hasn't been, and I couldn't get an answer as to why that was. I think it was an oversight, but that is on track now. Graham and I have had the output from the all of the feedback from the corporate review has come through to us, and they're looking at all of the suggestions made by members and members of the public and stakeholders of how we draw it into a single document. So that's probably the one big one that will also flip some of these from orange to green. But very happy to take questions on the specifics.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Chief Exec, did you want to add anything? Incidentally, before, I think, Leader, thank you. You've actually answered a number of the queries I was going to raise with you. But because what I would like to do is actually look at each line item to go through them very, very quickly, because even the ones that are cleared have got next steps associated with them, and members may have a question against those. Chief Exec, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the only thing I would add is the SIPFA financial review is underway at the moment. Interestingly, that wasn't required by Deluxe. They made a specific decision in our case to ask for an assurance review, not a finance review. One of the outcomes of the assurance review was that Leslie Surrey suggested that we had a SIPFA financial review, which is happening now. To be frank, if that had been the Deluxe recommendation, it would have been done and dusted by now, and we would have had the conclusions of that. But that's being completed. Just one update, item number 5 about the party whip. I have now had assurances from every political group leader that they do not apply a whip to overview and scrutiny. So that one can now turn blue as well. So I think we're making good progress. We had the first formal quarterly review with Deluxe Civil Servants, I think, last week. And that they were very positive about it. What they've agreed is that we don't need to report those things that we've now registered as blue, completed. They don't want to hear anything more about now. They just want to focus on the remaining ones that are progressing. So they're content. I would say that their attention is being focused on other local authorities right at this moment. There are plenty of others that are in a worse position in terms of their governance. So that's helpful.
Thank you. Okay, members. Just before we start, I say I was very pleased to see the combination of both the government assurance review and your own combined within a single report. It makes it quite easy to look at it and combine the actions.
Not to mention Sophie Bradford, who's given us all the support on that and has done the melding and has the unenviable job, probably, of maintaining this and keeping it all up to date, and is doing that. So thanks, Sophie.
Okay, so members, what I propose to go through each line item one by one, unless there is anything general that somebody would like to raise before we do that. So shall we just go straight into looking at the action plan? Okay, and we'll quickly go through those. Okay, so action 1, that's been done. I think nothing to say about that one.
Actually,
yes, sorry, go on.
Yes, I just wondered this one, and it may apply to some of the others as well. Some of these things are things that we put in place now, but we're thinking of monitoring it in the longer term because they're things that could change at any time. And what we're looking at here is for them not to change. So I just wondered whether it's possible for us to put some of these things into our constitutional standing orders as a council, whether we can look into doing that so that we don't have to just monitor it.
Yeah, Leader, thank you.
Yeah, so any member can suggest anything to go to the governance working group. I suggested 2 items, and I've gone back to one member. The other member may be listening to hear that. In fact, I reported to you, didn't I, Councillor Bartlett? The 2 issues I've asked the governance group to look at. One is around councillor call-in, general rules around it, and the other one is around how we treat BCP council developments or developments on BCP council land, and whether the rules need to change around that. And the chair of the governance working group, which is the subcommittee of audit and governance, has confirmed they're both on the agenda for January. So I think they've probably filled their quota for January. But they're certainly, still taking work items, and I think you're absolutely right. There's another item which I discussed today with somebody around a suggestion that was made that all committees, a changeover of council at the end of a 4-year cycle, should be required to have their first meeting within 28 days to establish their chair and vice chair, and or the allowance of the previous chair stopped at the point of a new council, so that there isn't any issue with regard to someone hanging on and hanging on and hanging on if they're the person who controls the agenda for that committee. It seems perfectly sensible. End of cycle, start fresh. And so I was going to suggest that, but absolutely, Councillor Aikenhead, hop it forward.
Councillor Tarley.
Yeah, well, I agree with Councillor Aikenhead. Certainly, I think that the sentiment behind doing that is very good, but I wouldn't want to tie the hands of the Audit and Governance Committee, who are probably going to look at that. And I think if we set that down as that's what this board would like to see, are we sort of directing them too much, or restricting their work in any way?
I think what I was going to consider was that we would take an action, and can we put an action on the minutes that we will write to the chair of A&G and set down any ideas or thoughts for their consideration, without actually going hard nosed and saying this is what we want you to do. We can't do that, but it is a suggestion, and there are a number of areas I think that will come across where we can do that. So I think that we'll take a note of what the discussions are today. If there any fall into that category, then we'll put it in a letter to the chair of A&G for their consideration. If you're happy with that. All right. Yeah. Okay. Chief Executive, you wanted to come in?
Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Just a very brief comment. That's fine wherever possible. There will be some circumstances where it isn't. So, for example, if I give a neutral example, I used to work at London Borough, Barking and Dagenham, 51 Labour councillors, no other councillors. Very difficult to have both in scrutiny chair from outside the administration. It just depends on the numbers after the election. And so there's always a wherever possible or that sort of caveat in there.
Thank you. So that was item 1. Was it 43 to go? Was it? Okay. Number 2, a more informed basis for ONS recommendations. Anybody got any comments on that one?
This is specifically aimed at new boys and girls about training. I would like to see more training. I've been talking to colleagues about especially scrutiny committees, whereby there is not enough contribution from councillors, particularly new councillors, who I think may well be unaware of what to do, literally. And I think there is a basic assumption sometimes from the executive and political groups that new councillors will eventually get up to speed and almost assume knowledge by osmosis. And I think one day for scrutiny was not enough. My personal feeling is that I'd like to see a meeting with the Director of Law and Governance with ONS committees to thrash out a training programme for the councillors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do actually have an ongoing training programme for ONS members, which Lindsay, our Democratic Services Specialist, has been setting up for us. And I think we should have already received some notification of the dates for those. But let me ask Lindsay to give you a brief on it.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have done ONS Essentials training as part of the induction programme, which is what I think you were referring to. And there has been other training that is targeted at ONS members, and there will be some work programming training going on between December, February, which will be quite comprehensive for this panel and the Environment and Place Committee. But one of the actions in the ONS action plan is to have an ongoing programme of training. And so receiving feedback like that is really helpful and useful, because we obviously need to know where you need to target your training. There are different ways we can take our resources throughout each year. And so we'll take that up and seek input. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say this was coming from other OS scrutiny committees, not just me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Goodall. I mean, it's pretty daunting actually when you become a councillor. The numbers of meetings that you go to, you go, "Oh, on earth am I ever going to get to grips with all of this?" A lot of it does come, of course, with experience, and all I can say is, if there is an issue, just ask somebody, just ask, and I'm sure we'll all help out. We have a lot of new councillors as well at the moment, so it does compound that issue. But I do understand it, having had to go through that process. But of course, you never stop. You never stop learning. You never do. Okay, let's move on then. So item number 3. Sorry, Leader.
Sorry, can I just reflect on something I said on Tuesday night, and then I'm having a look at the report, items 18, 19, and then somewhere down near the bottom where there's something about member-led council, 40 something I think it was. Just to remind that we have agreed to have a session Graham and I've been talking about specifically what Councillor Goodall says. You come in, you do the member induction programme, you think you've learnt all the stuff, and then you realise the stuff you learned wasn't the stuff you really needed. And it's only now that you've realised the stuff you didn't know, or the course you didn't go to. So the whole purpose of that is to give people that sort of safe space to go, I have no idea what you're talking about when you're referring to X or Y. And also that will help us to feed into the governance review that is referred to later on, that's due to commence in the new year, so that we can really understand what is it that councillors feel doesn't work for them, and then what are the methods by which we can improve them. Is it through training, or is it constitutional change, or complete governance change? So I think there's quite a few of these items that are rolled up in that, and that's already Graham's just trying to get a date set in the diary for before Christmas.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, item number 3. Broaden the scope of the overview on scrutiny, focus on cabinet scrutiny, and we do now have set in place the training programme to develop our choices for our overview and scrutiny activities. There is, of course, a positioning of this board prior to cabinet to enable us to look at cabinet reports if we so desire, but we are clearly looking more broadly than that. But it is very difficult when you see some of the items that come up, sometimes at very short notice, which are really important. I mean, for example, the corporate strategy going forward, which is now on the agenda, cabinet agenda for December, and you know, we won't have looked. It's going to be very difficult to fit that in because we have the local plan to look at in our meeting in December. Plus our statutory review of law and order and all those things. So it's going to be very difficult. But yeah, Leader, you wanted to come in.
I just wanted to gauge views really, because I've been really keen to try and get the forward plan populated for a long period of time, a year ahead. But the problem when you do that is you then get criticised when things move. And sometimes things have to move because officers have to deprioritise or reprioritise. You know, there's a piece of work at the moment I know one officer has been working on that was due to come to a committee, and they've now got the opportunity for a funding bid or a report for a funding bid that we could lose significant money if we don't get out, and so they've had to change things around. What I don't want to do is put officers in a position where they commit to something and then when it moves, they get criticised. So at the moment, I think they're erring on the side of caution, not putting them on until they can be sure when the date is. And that then means it looks like there's no oversight. So I'd be keen to get the views of the committee as to would they rather that it went on there with a general date from Lindsay as to whether there can be a spring 2024 rather than a specific date, because I think we're having a bit of ping pong backwards and forwards, which is the better option. And if scrutiny would prefer one option and we're all of the same voice, then at least we can go forward and say, well, if it shifts by a month or two, so be it.
Yeah, I think we're going to come on to action 7 in a minute, which actually talks about the timing of reports and things. And so if we could just come back to that one in a minute. Thank you. I beg your pardon, Councillor Broadhead, please go ahead.
Yeah. Just on that point, I've got 2 points on this particular item. The first one, I think it's absolutely acceptable to have broad dates on the forward plan. It's always better to have things on the forward plan than not on the forward plan. I feel the leader's pain. There's nothing worse than that difficult decision of do I put it on and then it slides, or do I not put it on and then it looks like we're not being open. So I just think it's always better, and I would never criticise that, because I think it's better to look at the direction travel, and indeed then gives scrutiny a better opportunity to look at things that they might want to get ahead of. So it seems pragmatic to me, and I'm sure there's a way we can make it work. My point is the wider issue on this, and whether we have actually met what we have been criticised for in the past. And I appreciate your sentiments at the beginning. This is a really thorny one to nail, and we've been grappling with this for some time. We had the corporate peer review about a year ago, maybe a year and a bit ago, which brought this exact point up. It says that your scrutiny function is too focused on cabinet scrutiny and not enough forward looking. Our response was always, for those of us that were involved in the early days of setting up the authority, that we knew that there was going to be things coming at pace, and that's why certainly in the initial period that's how this scrutiny function was modelled. But we got criticised for it. So as the last administration, we responded to that and made a change to move away from one scrutiny board that just looked at cabinet related scrutiny and moved to two boards to try and encourage that forward look. We got incidentally heavily criticised for that, but it was a response to the corporate peer challenge. We then moved to the assurance review, and even with that new system in place, which a lot of people criticise us for doing, we still, in the assurance review, got criticised for the fact that we have too much pre-cabinet scrutiny. And somehow our solution to that was to go back and to create more pre-cabinet scrutiny by extending this board's remit. And I understand the aspiration that, well, could that give more room to the other functions? But overall, the other functions have, few meetings, and the quantum of scrutiny is here. So I think this is a very difficult one to turn blue, because if we really wanted to conform to the recommendations that we've been put forward, we should be doing less pre-cabinet scrutiny, and yet we've just changed the constitution to do more, back all over again.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. I don't actually agree with you totally, because we've got to consider the overview and scrutiny function as a whole. So we've got all committees, not just this particular board. So if you look at the round, in the round, is everybody looking at pre-cabinet scrutiny? I don't think we are. This board is likely to do more of that, and that was the reason for positioning, because how can you ignore some of the cabinet papers that are actually going through? The point about getting stuff on the forward plan, I agree with you 100% on that. And I think as long as the title is on there, you don't have to put a date, as long as we know it's coming along, as long as we understand that it's a subject that's being dealt with. At some point it will come and get a date. All I would say is that once you get a date that it's committed to, we stick to it, because it doesn't help if we don't. Sorry, you wanted to come back on something I said.
I do agree that the point, however, is that the wider overview and scrutiny is defined by the areas that they're looking after, which are namely health and adult social care, children's, and then there's one other kind of more generic scrutiny function, which is environment and climate change, I think it is now. So the quantum of everything else is channeled through this committee, and if we are then continue to be focused on pre-cabinet scrutiny, which incidentally, for the record, I value, and I think it's really, really helpful. I'm not necessarily criticising it, but it does just immediately give us less scope to look at anything to do with, planning or corporate structure or anything that we were wanting to look at in the forward plan. So, I've never been a huge critic of pre-cabinet scrutiny, but, for the third time now, we have been criticised for a heavy reliance on pre-cabinet scrutiny, and we haven't, resolved it. I'm not giving us the solution. I'm just pointing out that we've been told what to do, and we haven't done it.
Okay. That's right, kids. Taking that. Sorry.
It's okay. I've looked at this very carefully, and I don't think anywhere it says that we are doing too much scrutiny of the cabinet. I believe that it's very important that cabinet decisions are scrutinised, but what this is saying is that we should have a much broader focus and not only be doing cabinet scrutiny. So I believe what it's suggesting here is that we just need to do more scrutiny, which is very challenging because we don't have more money, but we are having now this committee is meeting twice as many meetings that it was having before. So that gives us an opportunity. And also, at the beginning, when we started with this committee, I was thinking, well, when are we going to do workshops? When are we going to do workshops? All the training talked about workshops. But now I have seen things that showed me that we are going to do workshops. So on that basis, I think that we are going in the right direction on this. And I think that it's a difficult road, But once we start getting into those workshops, I think then we'll be able to see whether we're really meeting these or not.
Thank you very much. Lindsay.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to update on a couple of things and help hopefully with that discussion you were just having. So in terms of action 3, which is about moving on from cabinet scrutiny, having more policy development, the support that we're receiving from the LGA and the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny is really quite comprehensive to assist the committee over the months of December, January and February, along with Environment and Place. And so that will help you to look very broadly at all the sources of information you can take and how you want to structure your forward plan. So those are that's the place to have those discussions about how do you want to do your scrutiny? Do you want to do it just before cabinet or in another way? I think the suggestion about putting things on the cabinet forward plan is a useful one because it would give you some awareness of what's coming up. And really, I think we can get hung up on the cabinet forward plan as the mechanism for being aware of what's coming up, when really I think that really good practice is to have regular informal discussions between decision makers, executive officers as well, and overview of scrutiny. And that doesn't have to be the chair and the vice chair, it could be champions from across the committee, so that you know what's coming up and the progress of it. And then you will be much more able to decide how you want to engage. And that might be an early piece as the policy work is developing, for example, and mean that you then don't have to see the full cabinet paper when it goes through. I think there's probably some work to do to transition you to that sort of way of working rather than just pre-cabinet scrutiny. But I certainly think that might be the aim rather than just looking at reports the month before they go in. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one, and I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if we just had our own agenda and we could work right and we didn't have to worry about a cabinet forward plan? Doesn't matter, as long as we've got our, it would be easy then, wouldn't it? But it's not. It's very difficult to get that balance. But we will certainly be trying to do more of that type of work. So, right, where were we? Number 3 was it? Number 4. That was number 4, basically. Number 5. Number 5 we've already dealt with. Number 6, that's been dealt with. I don't think there's any comments about that one, is there? Number 7, all reports to be published on the statutory date. Can I just ask, what is the statutory date when it comes to reports? Is it something the law says we have to do, or is it something Chief Exec has says we have to do? In that case, it makes it statutory.
I think the requirement under the Local Government Act is to publish 5 clear working days before the meeting. It says to publish the agenda. There can be debates about what do you mean by the agenda. Is it okay just to put the front sheet out saying report to follow? That doesn't enable members to have time to really read it through. I think case law would indicate that it should be the full report. Historically, I think every council, every now and then, finds itself in a position where it has to send a report out a day or 2 late, so it puts as much information on the agenda as it can. I think we got into, it was too easy to do that. Here, I've instructed Dem Services that can only be done now with my approval, either a late report or an additional, an addendum report or supplementary report. Needs to be with my personal approval or with the Director of Law and Governance. So we just tried to tighten up on it, but the law itself would say you've got to publish the agenda 5 clear working days beforehand.
Okay, so essentially once the agenda's published, that's it. So, yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, number 8. Would you like to say anything about number 8 over above what's on there, which is it's on amber?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would say is we are currently in the process of recruiting a new Director of Law and Governance, and it feels to me where a lot of these issues are actually the actions of the Director of Law and Governance, and they are for a time that hasn't yet passed. It would feel appropriate to actually enable ourselves to get the right person in place, and do what they've been asked to do and actually make them accountable to that, rather than us make judgments and then they have to respond to it. That's just my personal view. I don't know if anyone feels any differently.
It's when I read the action, I just wondered if there was going to be a fundamental change in the approvals or process, you know, in terms of financial or those sort of things.
I think it's worth looking at again. So our sense is, or my sense is, that more decisions go to the full council for approval here than I've seen elsewhere. Having said that, councillors' expectations are that more things would go to the council than currently go to the council. So I think there is a balance in there. Our financial limits are similar to neighbouring authorities, and I would say they're probably similar to Southampton and Portsmouth and places like that, but we are twice their size. So we probably have twice as many things going through. So I think there is a question to be asked. To be honest, I'm not sure it matters what the answer is. It needs to be the right answer for us as a council. But I think the recommendation is to have that discussion, have that debate, compare with other councils, and then decide where we want to be. If that's helpful.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay. Okay, I won't read out the action. No, action 9, anything? 10? 11? 12? 13? 14? 15? I think leader's already commented on that one. Yeah. 16? 17? Councillor Broadhead.
Just on the 17, I appreciate the leader has been very busy lately, but we have seen a drop off in the weekly emails, which are very, very time consuming. I understand, but quite beneficial to everyone. So, but I'm sure her aspiration is to get us back up and running.
Yeah. Leader?
Yeah, I would question whether an email every week is actually valuable, either a valuable use of my time in creating one, or whether actually all of the communications that we get already in terms of all of the press releases and things means that actually it was more meaningful to have them when there's something to say. Spending half my day on a Saturday trying to populate a long email is not necessarily the best use of time. If there's things people specifically would like me to update them on, I'm always very happy to. I just wonder how much value there is for everybody else and how often they were reading them.
Thank you. Well, I guess this came out of the chief exec's review, so we better ask him. Thank you, chief exec.
I think this is one of the things we should ask councillors on their opinion for. I think that they have proved to be very useful. I think they've proved to be read by most people. Lots of people comment to me on the content, whether it's a weekly, fortnightly, 3-weekly. But I just think the sort of cadence of a regular update from the leader helps councillors to feel engaged. So we'll talk through what's the appropriate timescale for that. It might just be a monthly update, because there is quite a lot of communication going out. We send every press release, there's internal newsletters, etc. So I think that the sense would be just to work out what the right regular profile is.
Thank you. I think we probably wrote ourselves into a bit of a corner on that. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to give my opinion straight away on it. I'd look forward to them, leader. I agree with Councillor Broadhead. It's nice to have a summary of. I'm not being whipped apparently, so I can speak freely here, and I do find it quite useful. I appreciate that we get other emails from other sources, but I think and I appreciate, leader, you don't have to necessarily write it yourself, but certainly a compilation of it would be, maybe the forward of it would be quite useful. Thank you.
I think lots of us sitting in our chair on a Friday afternoon, waiting in bated breath for your email on a Friday, leader. Thank you, Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think it's valid to note the last bit, continue to circulate key information, because that's really what we need, isn't it? Not so much. We can follow Facebook to see where Vicky has been hiking at the weekend, if that's, which is fascinating. But I think if it's fortnightly or whatever, but it is key information.
Are you sure you want to?
Just come back because I tend to prefer Twitter to Facebook, but there we go. But no, I would just come back to what Councillor Tarling said, and that is actually, I think there is value in it actually being written by the leader. I don't think it's relevant to be written by some random person with just sent from me. I think it should be clear if something's being sent on my behalf, it should be clear that it's not me that's written it, it's being sent on my behalf. But I'm happy to commit to doing them, whether they're every week, but I would rather they work from me properly and not someone masquerading as me, because most people can tell when it's really me.
I think we're.
Yeah.
Have some more.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if I could just add to the key information, definitely, but also when there's been an incident, something, quite major has happened, and then it was actually useful to get an email from the leader explaining all the bits and pieces that we didn't know from the press releases. I think that would be useful. Thanks.
Yeah, to be fair, I think we always do get those. In my experience, those always come out anyway, outside of a routine kind of commitment of interest values. Yeah, I think my view is that we leave it with you, leader, to decide what it is you feel is necessary. That would be my view. Thank you. Okay, so number 18. 19. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I'd just like to mention about the follow-up sessions, because after the member induction programme, which actually I thought was really, really good, I think there's something of a need to manage some member expectations, and by that I mean what you can and what you can't do, what you can and what you can't make happen, or change locally, because often, for example, central government legislation doesn't allow you to do it. And of course, there is quite a lot of central government legislation around local government issues. So I think members need to know exactly what is possible, what they can achieve, and how they can achieve it, and preferably without upsetting too many people along the way. It's just a question of, how you go about making a change and what you can change as a local government member.
So have you got any thoughts about how we might do that?
Well, I just feel that, in a follow-up session to go through some of the requests that have come in, and then possibly to say why this couldn't be managed and what you could do around it, what sort of mitigation you can make. Because some people think they can just make a motion and then all of a sudden everything's going to happen, and it doesn't work like that. It's just the process a lot of the time. I'm not new, so it was difficult for me to sort of think, why are you doing this? And for new members, it must be really tricky to work out what you can and what you can't do.
Thank you, Councillor Walters.
Yeah, just I think for a lot of, if we want more young councillors involved in the council, because obviously there's a few of us, but we often tend to work quite a lot just because life is expensive and we have to have a full-time job in order to be able to do everything that we want to do in our lives. I did find that there was quite a few training sessions. I did watch them online, and I'm happy to watch them online, but I also quite like to be engaged in them. And it'd be great if the training sessions for induction could take place, have one during the day and one outside of the 5 p.m. I appreciate that there were a lot outside of the 9 to 5 period, but there were some that I really like the look of that I just couldn't attend in person. I think that's one bit of feedback I would give from the training sessions.
I think, is that something you've got a note of? Is there anything we can do about that?
Well, just to say, Chair, that I'm capturing all of these points as they're being raised, and I'll obviously feed them back to the head of democratic services, and then we can feed into the work that's being planned to source views from members, and I think they can all be considered in the mix. Thank you.
Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, I had a very similar point to Councillor Waters there. Except to add to that, the opportunity to do it online as a Teams virtual session. I noticed we've got a virtual councillors resource room, which I haven't found yet, so I need to be pointed towards that at some point. But yeah, I think that it would save a lot of us driving or cycling into the town hall for that purpose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's just move on. 19. That's part. Oh, that's the same as the one above, isn't it? Basically, yeah. 20. Mentoring. Yeah. Well, that's useful itself. That. 20. 21. 22. 23. 24. 25. 26. 27. 28. Councillor Northover.
Thank you. I was just looking at that number 28 and I wondered perhaps it needs to be communicated with councillors unless I've missed a communication, because we do sometimes get correspondence from external parties, and I think it could be easy to get into a conversation that was not compliant with our policy. I don't think I was aware that that was actually written in the constitution or added to the constitution. So yeah, perhaps it needs to be spelt out. Thanks.
I agree with you, Councillor Northover. In fact, I had a discussion with the portfolio the other day that said, well, why don't you just write to the so-and-so? And I thought, hang on, I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do it. And it would be easy to fall into that trap, make a mistake. And I think if it's not clear, or maybe if it's in the constitution though, isn't it? So, yeah, Chief Exec.
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks, Joe. I'm happy to pick it up during part of the December training, if on the revision of, where are people, what information have they got? So I think that is the sort of thing that we can rehearse, because particularly for new councillors, they've now had 6 months of being in the council, they'll see where the pressures are. So we'll pick that one up specifically, and some of the previous points as well.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Dedman.
Well, can I just say then that I don't think that it's clear enough on the action to say ensure all correspondence with external parties, because that could cover so much. In the previous one, you say external companies that are seeking to do business with the council, but just the bit of external parties. I mean, I'm sure everybody else around this table knows exactly what it means, but I certainly don't, because it could almost mean that you're emailing people, and we certainly don't have to ask officers to do that for us, do we? I just think it needs to be tightened up verbally.
Would this be something for the audit and governance to consider in terms of the change to the constitution, possibly to provide additional clarity?
Can I just be really stupid here and say, I'm not really quite sure what this means. I mean, when you say ensure all correspondence with external parties is in accordance, well, I have about 100 emails a day, of which at least a third are to external parties. Are we referring to, is this a code for something that may have happened under a previous leader with certain persons? And can we actually be more clear about what it is that we mean? Because I would like to think that the behaviours of that previous leader will never be seen again, and therefore we perhaps do not need draconian measures because our behaviours are different.
I think I'll come to you, Councillor. I think actually can be either end of the scale. It could be the worst situations, and on the other hand, it can be a simple administrative thing where a councillor wants to write to their local school to ask them to do something, when actually it wouldn't be appropriate for them to do that either, because it should come from a formal channel within the council. So the idea is, members make requests to officers. Officers then go to the appropriate channel within the council, and then to the school. Go on.
Just in reference to that assumption, I regularly write to my schools to ask them to deal with problems with litter and to ask them to sort out their parents' behaviour and to ask to visit them. And actually, that's my role as a ward councillor. And I think there is a massive overstepping of the line here if there's an expectation that all correspondence with third parties comes from an officer. We might as well pack up and go home, because I completely disagree with you on that one. And so I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to mean, and perhaps we could all do some training, because certainly you probably want to look at, I mean, half the emails I send would be completely outrageous then.
This is true, Leader. Thank you. Councillor Devon.
Well, I just want to point out that everybody acted as if they knew what it meant, and now clearly we don't. So, but I do think, so good old me for playing the fool. But no, I really just think it needs to be tightened up. For example, it's a bit like when you go have a site visit with planning, an officer is always there. That's fine, and you don't commit the council to anything ever. That's fine. But I think this is just a bit too woolly.
Yeah, thank you. Chief Exec.
Thank you, Chairman. The section this is referring to is on page 622 and 623 of the Constitution, the Member Officer Protocol. And we can clarify the wording in here because it relates to official correspondence written on behalf of the council must normally be in the name of the relevant officer rather than in the name of a councillor. And then it talks about letters to the minister, for example, might be an exception, but does say correspondence which creates legally enforceable obligations or gives instructions on behalf of the council must never be sent in the name of a councillor. That is the issue that this recommendation was dealing with, because that had not always been complied with. So we will clarify the wording in the action plan to be really clear. It's about creating a legally enforceable obligation or giving instructions that should not be done in the name of a councillor and had been, which was unacceptable.
Thank you for that clarification, Chief Exec. I think we can move on then, members. Yeah, 29. 30. Can I just ask when we're likely to see the priority list from the, or is it too early to ask about that, the future places?
So all of the staff are now in the house, which is great news, and they are working through the papers to figure out what the costing, so the value of the work that they're doing. I think the as far as the priority list, I think we've been fairly clear on that there are 4 or 5 areas that we're prioritising, which is the Poor Leisure Centre, Holmes Bay, the BIC, decision on Wessex, the future Wessex Fields, as the key areas that we've asked the new Investment and Development Directorate to focus their energies on. The main piece of work is in establishing all of the work that the former Future Places company had been working on, the 19 projects, and which of those have value either within those envelopes or with regard to their use in the local plan or being put sort of as part of a sales package. So, for example, the work they did on Paul Civic Centre, Christchurch Civic Centre, Beach Road Car Park, etc. So there is pieces of work that may or may not have value. That's the piece of work that we should have the answers on by January. In terms of the short list of projects, I think that was published back in September as to what those projects were going to be.
Thank you, Leader. 32. So that was it on 32, yeah. 33. 34. Yeah, this is the one that you mentioned earlier on. Just if you recall at our last meeting, I did actually suggest we get a rapporteur to look at this issue. I now don't think we need to do that because it's being encompassed in this review. And besides that, we need to understand what the companies are before we actually start looking at the business plans and all the rest of it. So I think we don't need to carry on with that. We'll just wait for this action to go ahead. 35. Yeah, 35. Well, I think Reader's already sort of mentioned a bit about that. what is a member-led council? I thought we were actually, but the chief exec is looking as if he wants to talk.
I think it's only to say that I think the idea is to produce paper that gives a bit of clarity, that builds on the member officer relations in the constitution, doesn't replace it, but just builds on that and explains a bit more about how we want to create that balance. That paper, I think, lies with me at the moment, having had sort of final comments on it.
Thank you. 36. 37. 38. Yeah, I had a question on this, Chief Exec. Is the decision to adopt the safety valve programme firm, or is it subject to a cabinet and then council decision?
Thanks, Jim. Yes, really clear on this. The only decision that I've taken so far is to enter into negotiations and discussions on the safety valve programme. Should we be able to negotiate something that we believe is acceptable with DFE, we'd then get members' approval in the normal way, which would, given the scale of it, would have to come through cabinet, would have to come through council as well. You know, there is a real question about whether we are going to be able to agree an acceptable package with DFE or not. So we've entered negotiations, we're having those negotiations. Our challenge is that our deficit has risen more quickly to a higher annual number than they are used to seeing, and that's the challenge. The service has improved, demand has gone up, and that's gone up very rapidly over the last 3 years or so.
It's amazing that the government put local authorities in this situation and then expect the local government to sort it out on their behalf. It's outrageous, really. 40. 41. Can I just go back to 40? The ERP systems. I'm fairly interested in finding out how how useful the system is, and how the directorates are using it and what value they're getting from it. Probably something we can look at a bit later. It's probably a bit early yet, I would imagine. But I think given the investment in the ERP system, we probably need to understand a bit more about the benefit that we're going to get from it. And personally, I think I mentioned it at the last meeting, I'd like to see some kind of demonstration. If any members are interested in the ERP system, that we give some sort of presentation on what it does and what benefits we get from it.
Thank you. I'm happy to comment on that. Actually, Matt Filmer is the finance expert on that system and has been very helpful in, for example, demonstrating to the cabinet how they can use the system now to look at the budgets that are set for this year, the outturn for last year. I have access to the system now and can get, as I was demonstrating earlier, from the council's total budget, net budget £320 million, in about 15 clicks, I can get right the way down to individual transactions within a budget code to say exactly who has spent what on what. That is unprecedented in either BCP or Bournemouth or Poole councils. So we now have a way of tracking through the financial information that allows us to challenge the way the budget has been set, the allocations for the budget, and at the moment our budgeting process has been setting next year's budget based on this year's budget. I want to set next year's budget based on this year's forecast outturn, so we can modernise and accelerate that process. We can also get real-time information as those transactions go through and see how the budget is developing. It's not 100% accurate yet. You know, we've had lots of challenges about whether the budget is right or not, but we are very, very close to it being accurate, and departments have been feeding into that. That's always a long-term iterative process. This is the fourth ERP system I've introduced in councils or similar size organisations. It always takes a year to bed in. And for the first 3 months, everybody always says it's absolutely dreadful and it's far, far worse than the previous regime. For the next 6 months, they work hard trying to get there. And then in the following 3 months, at the end of the year, they begin to realise the benefits. We have already seen huge benefits during the budget discussions, I believe, because we can expose cabinet members to the budgets right the way down to individual cost centres, individual services, what we spend on salaries, what we spend on goods. We can also look right across the organisation at everything we spend on stationery in real time. There, so actually, I would just recommend, and I know Henry for this, but I think Matt should do a demonstration to your next meeting, 10-15 minutes, just to take you through the system, to show you the information that's available. You'll then all want to get access to it because you'll want to see what's spent on what. It is a sound system. It is a challenge because it's a fairly new system in local government. There's only a couple of other councils using it. We've had to change some of it. So I wouldn't pretend that it's 100% exactly as we want, but it is giving us access to information in a way we've not had before.
Thank you. Can I just ask, capital spend, can you monitor project expenditure in real time with the ERP system?
Could I refer to Mr. Filmer for that response, because I haven't actually done that myself, so I'll rely on his expertise.
Through you, Chair. The answer is yes, you can.
That's great. I'm really pleased you said that. I hate to get a computer says no answer for that one. So thank you. Any else on that one? No? Okay. 41 transformation program. No, Leader did mention the transformation, and transformation overseas board or whatever it's called, committee. And I went to that meeting. I have to say, I was very encouraged by the work that had been done, the clarity that we got from the progress on the programme, and green shoots emerging from the work that's been done over a long period now. A lot of expensive work too, but it's now sort of started to shape up that the future's is definitely there, provided we can deliver on it. And the delivery is now starting. So let's hope it all works out. But I was really very encouraged by what I saw and what I heard. 42? No. Okay. All right. I think we're at the end of that then. So yeah, thank you very much for a very, very clear progress report. It's very useful, I think, to go through it in the way that we have. I don't think we will probably need to review it again, certainly for quite some time. So it's great to see the progress we've made. A lot of work been done on this. Just in this in itself is a huge task, but one that we needed. Councillor Tyler.
Yeah, quite some time is an interesting concept. Could we perhaps set a period of which what you think quite some time would be, and what the other members of this board think?
Yeah, maybe we can review it then in say 6 months. Does that sound reasonable, Chief Exec?
Just in terms of timing, Chairman, yes. What I'm hoping is that by the end of March we will have sufficient update for DLUC at the next formal or the quarterly formal review to say we probably don't need to monitor you anymore. We're happy with what you're doing. Whether we'll get the best value notice lifted at that point, or maybe the quarter after when they'll show it's embedded, I think that's the timescale. So I think a sort of an April review, if we update it to the end of March and then bring it back here for then, we're going to take it to the Cabinet as part of the performance monitoring, I think the quarterly performance monitoring. So whatever that cycle is, if we bring that to overview and scrutiny as well, we're happy to do that.
Okay, so we've taken action to look at that for 6 months. And again, it's something that we can put on our workshop for forward plan. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yep, thank you, Leader. So that takes us on to the next agenda item, which I believe is the NTFP. Thank you. Yeah, medium-term financial plan, and delighted to have the portfolio holder here this evening, who I assume will introduce it, Councillor Cox, and it's got Matt Filmer, Assistant Chief Financial Officer, and Nicola Webb, Educational Senior Financial Officer. Yeah, to answer any questions that members may have. Did you want to say a few words first, Councillor Cox, to introduce the paper?
Yes, certainly. Mr. Chair. The Director of Finance was so looking forward to it, he decided to take a holiday to Dartmoor, which is quite some excuse, particularly in today's weather. I just wanted to introduce the paper really is to remind people about the £44 million deficit which were inherited. That was set by the Director of Finance based on some instructions, I suppose, policies in terms of using only traditional methods. And what we did was what he did was strip out those items which hadn't been identified. There were in the previous iteration. There was a medium-term plan which had a number of unidentified items in there, and so all of those were stripped out, and that's where we got to the £44 million. And just to sort of emphasise that really this comes, the medium-term plan comes on top of the fact that in the current year we are working to try and implement £34 million worth of savings to the current year, 9 million of which was unidentified. So we've got quite some tasks so we've got to close the £44 million and as well as deliver the £34 million. So that's quite some task, and obviously on top of that we've got uncertainties to do with running a council and cost of living crisis, etc., etc. I just wanted to highlight really the some of the areas to look at, and obviously savings, efficiencies, fees and charges is a key item of as where most of the work has taken place in the last 6 months, to try and identify where we can find efficiencies, find savings, and that will include on some reductions in services, and some, in my opinion, quite painful reductions in services. I'd also point out the corporate items, cost pressures, and that includes a pay award of £12 million and also £6 million of the transformational, unidentified transformational costs I talked about earlier on. In terms of the funding changes, you'll notice there again a pressure of £12.6 million in the current year, and that's stripping out the £30 million which had previously been put in as a reduction from reserves, and therefore we've stripped that out, and that adds to the pressure in this year. Obviously less the increases in corporation council tax and rates. So I'll leave it there. If you want to ask any questions, that's fine.
Thank you. Okay, members, Councillor Debman.
I'm looking at point 3, transformation savings, and I'm interested where it says the approach of only including transformation savings based on current delivery plans rather than those assumed in the 2019 transformation business case. I'm trying to look at portfolio holder over my shoulder here while speaking into my microphone. So sorry, I'll just look at Sandra. So does that mean, portfolio holder, that 2019 thing, was that the one that we all sat through when we were told that this was going to save so much money and it was going to be brilliant? Is that what that was?
Yes, of course.
Yes. I wasn't there then, but yes, that was the figure. It was definitely not my fault. No. But no, that was the figure. I think there was some exaggeration, some hyperbole, maybe.
Yeah, can I just come back on that? So yes, we were sold a pup, which we always said at Christchurch we were.
Councillor Cox, where we sold a pub.
I think it should be emphasised that effectively we have made a number of savings over the years, and to be fair on Christchurch, they have had a frozen council tax for a number of years, and they have saved quite a bit of money on council tax over the years, and whether they should have done or not is another matter. And that's maybe where we've got the problem at the moment. But there has been a number of savings because of economies of scale and efficiencies. So there has been savings, no doubt about it. Whether it's as much as we were sold is probably in some doubt. Yes.
Yeah, councillor. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask a question on on page 50, where you've got the assumptions. The point 6 is the pension fund. So I was looking at that and I just wanted a bit of clarification to understand. At the very last sentence, it says, in comparing with other employers, the council has a total contribution in excess of 22%. So I just wanted to ask, is that because we have got a really good pension scheme for our staff, which is brilliant, or is it because our pension fund isn't doing very well, or is there some sort of, can put a little bit of explanation around why it is that we seem to be paying so much more, and just so as we can check that we're definitely getting value for money there?
Councillor Cox.
Well, if you look on, I think it's the same page, figure 1, you'll see there that the level of funding is 96%, and when in 2019, when we inherited it, it was 92%. So it has improved significantly over that period. So I would venture to suggest that we're doing okay with the pension scheme at the moment. Whether that continues or not depends on the stock market, I suspect. But I think we're doing okay.
I just noticed though in figure 2 that the projections don't seem to be going down for how much we would have to pay. And so if it was a catch up, I can see how it was from 2016, we've been catching up from 82% funded to 96, which is a huge catch up. So I can completely understand why we've been paying so much in. But is there a reason why it's projected that we will still need to carry on doing that?
Well, my experience is that one of the failures of pension schemes is that they when that does happen, they reduce their contributions and then they get into more trouble later on. So I would rather it be a consistent amount, despite the fact that it's quite a high amount, that it was a consistent amount rather than changed every year. So my recommendation would be to only reduce it where it was clearly overfunded, and that's a difficult point to take, a difficult evaluation to take, I would have thought.
But can I just ask a question like myself? I mean, I'm not familiar with the pension schemes. Is it a final salary scheme or a defined benefit, or is it a combination of both? Because there's been a change, or is it still?
As far as I'm aware, it's
Final
defined salaries. Defined benefit.
So, for you, Chair, the final salary scheme I think ended in about 2018. So there was a cut off, and then it's moved to a career average scheme.
And then a question that the Cabinet has outlined the process that we've undergone this year, and as I've said in previous meetings, the budget gap we're facing next year is very similar to what we faced for the last year. Last year was £3 million for a year. Previously it was £39 million, and the Cabinet member said next year it's 44. What happened at the beginning of this year, which the Cabinet has outlined, is a decision to look at the scheduled savings that have been put into the end again.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, a lot of what you say is correct, except that when you talk about the unidentified savings not being really unidentified, they were unidentified and they are still out unidentified. There was £9 million from last year, and in the current year, and that was assumed in the current year balance, in the current year accounts. And at the moment, there are 7 million, virtually 7 million of those is still unidentified in the current year. So our pressure, we have a pressure this year of about £4 million, seven of which, or seven, is a fact that we haven't identified where these savings are coming from, and they are transformation savings, so they're not there at the moment. So you know, I would take issue with the fact that that it's all coming through. It's not, and actually, you know, I'm not a skeptic of transformation. Transformation is absolutely vital to the way this council works, and it has to work. Otherwise, we are really going to be cutting services badly if we don't make it work. And at the moment, we are, you know, according to the latest figures, you know, we've got £12 million to find. I would love that to come from transformation. I do not want to be cutting services any more than we've already cut services. And so, you know, you know, we have the same ambition, but actually it's down to officers and politicians to work out how on earth we make this transformation work. And at the moment, it's too early days to actually to take it for granted. That makes sense.
Sorry, Councillor Broadhead, committee. We can't hear you on that particular mic as well. I wonder if it's if you can use Councillor Dove's.
That one better?
That one's working, yes.
That was the one I was using originally. Bizarre. You all missed my amazing soliloquy earlier on. I do apologise. Yeah, right. Do you want me to say? Shall I say my 10-minute speech? No, I've completely forgotten what I was saying. It was transformation. What I was saying was, I think the benefit of the validation exercise was that what was assumed of the unitemized transformation savings have been itemized, and actually I don't think that the outcome of that process, from what I've seen in the transformation working group, was that anything was made up. It's just that the way that the rest of the corporate entity works in terms of your savings proposals tends to be listed by departments and by initiatives. It's a bit more complicated with the transformation program, hence the reason why the outcome of that your own validation process is essentially pretty much over the next 2 years the savings that were in the original projections. So the reason for asking my forward-looking point is that what I took away from the last transformation cross-party working group was a clear indication from the transformation team that not only were they quite confident in the figures that we've now arrived at, but there might be more meat in the system as well. Now, what that says to me is that if you've got now a £7 million gap for next year, I'm talking about 25-26, it was kind of an ideological question, is that how much of the quantum of that should be, well, let's try and desperately, you know, I think transformation team said, we think we could get more out of the system. How much focus do you put on that? Or how much focus do you focus on the savings plans?
I haven't got a £7 million gap for next year. I've got a £7 million gap for this year. There was £9 million of unidentified transformational savings which were in this year's budget. At the moment, we've identified £2 to £3 million. There's still another £6 to £7 million worth that we have not identified, and is creating a pressure in the current year. In the 6 months that accounts to the current year, there is a pressure of £6 to £7 million, and that's to do with the unidentified savings that was in last year's budget. That's still there, and we haven't found it yet. Yes, there is good work happening on transformation. I've no doubt about it, but I haven't seen so far, and the Director of Finance hasn't seen so far, enough evidence, enough validation to actually put in some savings from transformation into next year's budget. God only knows. I wish we could, but at the moment we can't.
not that I wish to come back, but we are looking at the MTFP paper that's in front of us, and in the paper that you have presented tonight, next year there are 10.6 million pounds of transformation savings, and the following year 3.1, and then mild bits after that, which over the next 2 years is roughly 14 million, which is not dissimilar from what the forecast was in this year's budget. So I'm a bit confused as to your last statement that you still don't have confidence, because they're in your own projections, which is how you've got to the remaining 12 million pound gap for this year and a 7 million pound gap to fill for the following, sorry, for next 12 million pound gap for next year and 7 million pound for the year after.
Councillor Cox.
The transformation of 10 million pounds, which is in the MTFP, is a combination of different savings and efficiencies that have been created from the work we've done in the last 6 months. It has nothing to do with the budget that was set last year. That is still a gap. And what I've just been told is that the main problem with transformation at the moment is the third party savings. They have not been delivered in the way that was expected. And that is where effectively the hole arises.
That's important. Yeah, okay, thank you. So, anybody else? Got some more?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make a comment and a request, if that's okay. On page 40 and page 45, there's a list of directorates, the Wellbeing, Children's Operations, Resources and Transformation. And I think actually that this was actually raised at the budget briefing session that we had recently. But could there be information or a guide somewhere in future papers to show which services come under, the directorates under these headings? And I think that this information would not just be useful for members, but for our residents too, and could perhaps be incorporated on the council website, because I know a lot of residents are interested in our financial position, and it's not easy to understand local government finance. So I think a guide like this might be helpful. At least they'll know, which services come under which directorates, because otherwise they aren't going to get anywhere with looking at this. Thank you.
I think that's a very good idea. The more we can be transparent and show people the detail, the better. But the budget monitoring, the detailed budget monitoring paper, which is to follow, I believe, will show the detail of that and show you exactly what's involved.
Do we need to do anything then? Are you saying that the information is going to be presented in that way anyway, so we don't have to take an action to actually?
Yeah, it will be shown in detail in the budget monitoring. Yeah.
It was mentioned. Okay. Anyone else, members? Councillor Dedman.
Yes, just on that last point, point 8, I think it is, government autumn statement. Is the Chancellor of the Exchequer still Jeremy Hunt? Because everybody's been reshuffled.
Councillor Broadhead, any idea?
Well, I've just had a WhatsApp. No. As my understanding is that there is going to be no change there. On a wider point, and because it's just related to financial planning, I think we are under the. I think we've been told, Cabinet Member confirmed that our yearly kind of sweeties from government, which is coming probably as late as normal around. We've been told potentially Christmas Eve, but I am hearing rumours that because of some potential movement on that might slip by a few weeks as well. So, which always makes things a little bit difficult.
Just to confirm, we did hear last week that it cannot be with us any later than, I just can't remember if it's the 16th or the 19th of December. So previous speculation that it might go into the new year, I was told last week, was now going to be definitely, just can't remember if it's the 16th or the 19th, but one of those, so it'll definitely be with us before Christmas, apparently.
Thank you. Members, anyone else? I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Somewhere in the paper, there's an assumption about a £1.4 million per year cost on establishing the regeneration team, and I think it's to do with moving future places. My question was, does that now become a revenue expenditure, or does that revenue get captured, then capitalised as the projects emerge, or is it just now going to be an ongoing revenue cost?
That is an ongoing revenue cost. Clearly, if in future we actually make it makes some profit, it generates some capital. We're able to capitalise it, and that would be a credit when that happens. But until that happens, then there's that's not gonna, it won't be in any accounts until that happens. And I can see one councillor shaking his head that it might never happen, but yeah. But that's the theory. Yeah, apparently that's from our treasury management consultants. That's the figures we use it from them. I know different councils are using different figures, and some councils have been severely criticised for the low figures that are being used, but we're not being. I'd rather be prudent on that basis than actually be reckless and too imprudent.
I'm sorry, Chair, just to interrupt again, committee. Councillor Butler, we can't hear you on your microphone now. Perhaps if you can use an adjacent mic. It might be one of the plugs on the back of a mic.
How's that?
That's better.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, the £3.2 million it's not in next year's budget, but it is in the subsequent year. I didn't understand. It's in one of the charts somewhere.
Page 45.
It's on page 45 apparently. Oh yeah, yeah, there it is. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Understood. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Right. Members, anything else? We're all done. Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you very much. Right, let's just move on then to agenda item 8, the forward plan. Right, let's get the forward plan out. Now, members, as you're aware, we were originally scheduled to have a library scrutiny of the paper that we requested. Unfortunately, that paper wasn't forthcoming, but it will now be on, I believe, on the cabinet agenda as a cabinet paper in July, and we will be proposing, sorry, January, we will be proposing to put that on our agenda and the first meeting in July. But what we have got this evening is Councillor Andy Martin, as portfolio holder, has come along just to, in case we have some questions we'd like to ask him. He will give us a few words of introduction, and then if you have got questions that you'd like to ask about the library strategy or whatever, then he's here to answer the questions. I believe Matthew Rowslip's also on the call in case we've got any questions for him as well. Thank you very much for coming this evening, and I'm sorry you've been waiting for ages to join in. But so over to you then, Councillor Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay? I know there's been a few sound issues this evening. Yeah, great. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation after our little chat last week. I'm grateful for the opportunity to say a few words about the strategy. Obviously, this is a bit of an informal appearance, I suppose, because no doubt you'll want me to come back in January, just before the consultation strategy itself goes to Cabinet. So I suppose this might be considered, for me at least, a bit of a bonus appearance. I'm also very pleased to have Matty here for any sort of facts and figures and information that I don't have at my fingertips. Just to reassure everyone that the Cabinet report has been pushed back to make sure that we get this absolutely vital consultation process bang on the nail, because it's clearly very, very important. And I know there was some concern about the paper being moved back, but I just wanted to offer that reassurance first of all. As well as me just saying a few words, and I'll try and keep them brief. And I hope this is an appropriate forum. I know you're here to ask me questions and me to try and answer them, but I would welcome the opportunity for any feedback about that members have about their libraries or the library service in general, so that possibly we can feed that into the final report for January. And I would imagine we can all agree here just how vital our library service is and the individual libraries in our own wards. Obviously, as the paper isn't published yet and Cabinet hasn't had an opportunity to discuss the library strategy, so I'm obviously a little bit limited in what I can say, and clearly I can't speak on behalf of the rest of the Cabinet. But what I'd like to stress is that the strategy, the report and the library strategy is not about making decisions now on the future of the library service. It's to understand the future role that the library service can play in a council that puts people at the heart of its communities, and that obviously BCP is changing, BCP is transforming itself, and the library service needs to do that as well, or we need to look at ways of the library service doing that. I mean, you could call it a reimagining of the library service if you want. Obviously, all council services are changing. We know that, and that's against the backdrop of changes in society, against the backdrop of new technology, which seems to be changing day by day. The changing needs of our communities is also really important, and of course it would be wrong not to recognise the changing and challenging financial landscape that all councils are faced with. But can I stress, the library strategy is not being driven by a financial imperative, but by a community one. And in fact, it cannot be driven by a financial imperative, because the DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, frowns upon decisions about libraries which are made on financial grounds. They require them to be made on a needs-based assessment, and that is what this library strategy is all about. And obviously, I'm sure everybody will be aware that the library service is a statutory service. Insofar as my own opinions are relevant at this stage, which they're probably not, I just wanted to put down a marker that I think our libraries are vital community hubs that must play, should play, have to play an increasingly vital role at the heart of our communities. That's all I wanted to say, because obviously I know time is short. I'm happy to take any questions, but as I said, please, I would welcome the opportunity to hear your own views about the future of the library service and the libraries in your area. So back to you, Chairman. Happy to answer as many questions as I possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Members, Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things I've picked up a lot of feedback from lately is the difficulty people have in accessing the council's IT. There's a lot of elderly people in my patch, and there's a lot of disadvantaged people in my patch. Is there likely to be a priority on getting the people in libraries, because the libraries are one of the few places that residents can go to access IT equipment? Will libraries have people in them that are able to help residents access council IT, because as I say, I'm getting a lot of people sort of say that they're having problems in getting in and they can't make sense of what's going on, and I'm wondering whether there's a strategy to help people like that, which can be, well, it's about a third of the population, I think, is the standard format. Whether there's a strategy to sort of deal with that with our libraries.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Chairman, can I answer that?
Yeah, please. Yeah, please come in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Trent. I have every sympathy with your point, given that in my ward in Highcliffe and Walkford, I think I have the oldest population in Western Europe, I believe. So have very similar issues and very similar concerns amongst the population. I think, clearly what you've outlined is something that will almost certainly, well, without doubt, will come up in the strategy. It will be something that will be clearly addressed in the strategy. And actually, in some of the notes that I've made that I didn't address earlier on, I feel it's really important that one of the things we look at in the strategy consultation is that there are staff in libraries. It may be one of the key things that we look at, of having more of our staff in more of our libraries, so that they can very much help people who are not comfortable with the internet, don't have IT, don't have the digital skills to access council services. So I think there's a much broader discussion to be had about what we do in the libraries, what services we can provide in the libraries, and I think that it's very easy. I think given that this is still a relatively new council, and I think there's always a danger that a lot of people can feel a bit remote from it, because it is so big and because it is so complex, and even I struggle these days with technology, because it's and things like AI, so it's changing all the time. So I think that's something that we really need to put at the heart of the consultation, so that people can give their views, and it's something that we ought to really focus on as part of what are libraries going to do in the future. How are they going to work harder? How are they going to be at the heart of our communities? And that the point that you've made there, I think, is absolutely central to that whole issue. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Goodall.
I just wanted to say that down in Parkstone, which is where we have our monthly surgery, the staff, it's not really a question, but just a compliment, just to say the staff are absolutely brilliant. They're very wise. They told me as a new councillor, one of the things they said was, just remember that when you get to a surgery, usually people are thoroughly frustrated by the time they get to you. And what they want to do is have somebody to shout at. So that was fine. We learned from that. And the other thing is that they are our ears in the community, because they quite often say to us, well, have you heard about this? And quite often we can nip a problem in the bud before it gets worse. And for that, I'm hugely grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that comment, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Try again. Is that better? Right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say about the library in Camford Heath. I could be here for the next hour talking about it. I'm not going to. Don't worry. Don't panic. I work very closely in doing all sorts of things with the activities in the library, and we've got a Friends of the Library group. But I want you to know all about it, but I don't want to talk about it here. So I'll write it all down in concise notes and send it off, copied to each of you. Is that the way forward? Yeah. Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone? Okay, I mean, from my perspective, the library in my own ward, there was an attempt to close it about 8 years ago, because it is actually the smallest library in any area. And it was kept open, and the charity was established to support it, and have actually funded, along with help from the council to put a room up in the garden to give more give a kind of a community room. And of course that is a real issue, isn't it, about community. Libraries are far more than books now. It's much more about community facility, and so I think inevitably, they will be valued within the communities. Absolutely. I'm very encouraged, Councillor Martin, by your comment about the needs-based assessment. I think that is exactly the way to approach it. And of course, we also now have a declared dependency on providing council services at hubs located in libraries, which we say is a way of enhancing, if you like, our relationship with communities, rather than people being dependent, particularly for those that don't have access to IT, to actually go to library hubs to get help with services or inquiries or whatever. Certainly, I'm aware of the one in Kingston, which provides a very useful service to the community there. And so, in all, I think unquestionably the libraries are valued, and I wait with interest the assessment that you come up with, and I'm sure we'll all be looking forward to seeing the strategy paper.
Chair, could I just
sorry, yes,
sorry,
please.
Chair, could I just add something else? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Moore might be surprised to know that I know her library in Canada Heath very well, as well as the Pilot Pub just round the corner. But my broader point was, as part of the consultation process, I would like to visit as many of the libraries as possible. And we have 24, so I may not be able to get around all 24, but if anybody would like me to come and have a look at their local library and chat with them and chat with the staff and the residents who use them, I'm very happy to. So that's an open invitation. So please take that up if you feel it would be worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As I started, I expressed an interest that my wife works in the library service, so I probably get a daily feedback on what happens in libraries, and whether I like it or not, I have to hear. Obviously, Christchurch Library, my library, has recently undergone the transformation to become a community hub. And I think, although I think there's been teething problems, I think it's been quite successful. And certainly moving a registrar and citizen advice into the same area is fantastic. I think there's a way to go yet. The other question that I was asked to raise by a certain person was just harmonisation as well, and transformation, that Bournemouth Libraries is working on a different library system to Christchurch and Poole, which uses Libraries West. I do have a library card, do use it. There's audiobooks and lots of services on there that you can use. That there's not going to be any diminution in service by, I understand there's transformation going on to harmonise the systems across BCP, which I think needs to be done. But want to make sure that we are getting equal service that we got under Dorset Council, with following the measure with Bournemouth. Thank you.
Chair, perhaps if I could just come back on that particular question. We are harmonising, as the councillor indicated, on the Libraries West system. So that's the Libraries West system shared by a number of different councils, where we get economies of using the same IT system. So Bournemouth will be migrated onto the system that is already in operation in Poole and in Christchurch, which hopefully reassures the councillor that the same kind of service in the same way will be continued into the future.
Thank you. I've just got one sort of question of detail about Bournemouth Central Library, and that is it was purchased under a PFI deal. And I wondered, when does the PFI term finish? Because I'm aware of the fairly large payment that's made annually for the PFI deal. But I understood it sort of hasn't got that much longer to run. Are you able to say when that does it come to terminate?
Chair, it's in about 8 or 9 years. I haven't got the precise date in front of me. And yes, we pay net about £1.5 million a year to the PFI. There's more paid, but there are credits that the government also contribute. Our position, and it's part of the overall library budget, is around £1.5 million for the PFI.
Thank you. And worth every penny is too. Absolutely wonderful facility. Anybody else? Councillor Devon.
Oh, thanks, Chairman. I just wanted to say that certainly Christchurch Library, but I expect all the libraries, the buildings, actually do earn money for the council. For example, Christchurch Town Council has to have its meetings in the library at the moment, and they cost money, so that comes to BCP. But I think also, I don't know, Christchurch Library is a historic building, but I don't know if that would be a popular thing, but some libraries could move, couldn't they? I mean, I certainly, I know the Camford Heath one, I know the Kinston one, I know lots of them. And, you know, that there might be an element of, well, you could have a library elsewhere, or make the buildings that the libraries are in work much harder. For example, Christchurch, as Councillor Tarling says, we have the registrar, all sorts of things in that, and it works very, very hard for a big old building. So I think that, I hope that comes in this paper that we're getting when we get it.
Councillor Martin, did you want to come back?
Only to say that that will be again one of the key things in the library strategy consultation. What more can we do with the libraries? How harder can they be? Can they work? What more can they do for the community? So that Councillor Dedman's points are very on point as far as the strategy will be concerned. Just that reassurance.
Thank you. And my mind does flash back to my own experience in my own ward, where the proposal was to move the Entry Park Library to the Bournemouth Learning Centre, which was then properly turned into a special school. So had that happened, we wouldn't have had a library. So, you know, I think we just have to be mindful of what we wish for sometimes. Oh, careful. Yes, careful. Anything else, members? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Thank you, Matty, for coming along. I hope that's been of some value to you, and we look forward to seeing the strategy paper in January. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, members, I'll just turn to the detail of some of the stuff in the forward plan, and as we've discussed, that we are going to be having some meetings now to decide what we're going to be doing in the longer term. There are some things that, particularly for our meeting in December, where we're going to have to sort of agree the agenda. And I think I've pushed that out today, if I can remember right. Of course, we've got the local plan. That's there. And then of course we're going to start at 5 o'clock because of that. Yeah. And we've also got the annual review of the what's the title of it? It's to do with the law and help me out, Bobby, please. Community Safety Partnership. That's it. Yeah. And yeah, we've got one other. Is it the 20 mile an hour? No, that's January. Oh, something else. Yes. Sorry? Yeah, go on. Tell me what it was like. No. Oh, okay, that was it. Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, we'll have to look at that. But yeah, just a couple of other things. We have. Oh yeah, at our last meeting, I did mention complaints, whether we would look for a rapporteur or sort of some members to look into the complaints, because they're in a total council complaints procedure. Each department tends to deal with things differently. But in our briefing on transformation, I've discovered that actually they're focusing in on that with a new system. So given that, I don't think it's anything that we need to look at from this committee at the moment. Similarly, the company reviews, you know, the system of annual or 6 monthly reviews of council-owned companies. That's something else that's also, as we see it on the action plan for the assurance reviews that we've been talking about tonight. So again, that's been accommodated at the moment. So I don't think we need to really look at that at the moment. We have had 2 requests for overview and scrutiny. One related to the cost of bus passes, there's a real difference in school bus pass cost depending on whether you buy it through an app or you buy a physical pass, and the difference is huge. Now we'll put it on the plan, but for discussion later. But I've already asked the Highways Department if they can give me some kind of preliminary answer to that. But at the end of the day, Moorbus is a private company. We're not empowered to scrutinise them, and they set their own prices. It's a private company, but nevertheless, we could make representations, I guess, through our officers if we needed to. And at the end of the day, our officers do set out the transport plan for the communities, and there is a relationship between the bus company and the council. So maybe there's something that we can do to influence that. But really, that's quite an interesting item. And, you know, as I said, the costs are significantly higher. So it's been reported to me. But I can probably tell you what the difference is. Yeah, if you buy it with the mobile app, apparently the current cost is £558 per academic year, whereas a physical pass is £820. That's the difference. Councillor Northover. Absolutely agreed. It definitely is an impact on the council's expenditure, depending on the way that they would buy it through the physical one rather than that for lots of different people. So yeah, I understand that. Okay, so and the other one related to road danger for children. It was a very general sort of theme, but of course the Place and Environment Committee are looking at their next meeting, I believe, at road, the road safety around schools. The school areas. Yeah, please go. Yeah.
They do have that programme for their next meeting, the Environment and Place Committee. I'm not sure whether there may be a delay to that report. That's something I need to check on, but that was recent information. However, obviously, transport sits with your committee and environment sits there. The suggestion from Councillor Rice is quite broad. So that road safety item being looked at environment and place would be from an environmental perspective, not from the road safety perspective. That I'm aware of.
Yeah, and yes, please do.
Yes, one of the things that it does talk about in this report is the fact that we are going to do some workshops to help set ourselves a work programme. And so one possible suggestion is some of these ideas, if they're not things that we immediately want to put on our work programme now, we could consider them as part of those workshops.
Yeah, and the ideas are actually already listed on the floor plan. I think we'll just leave them there unless there's an obvious reason for taking up. But there are ideas, and we can decide at our workshop which ones we want to keep in there, which ones we don't. Councillor, I'll just come back to you. There's just one more item, and that was about performance reviews. Oh no, let me take your question first of all.
Yeah, thank you. It's just about the 20's Plenty campaign. Councillor Cox and myself did actually put that forward in Christchurch Town Council as a motion, which it was cancelled, I think, in light of changes, I believe, at a national level. And I'm not sure the dust has settled yet on transport policy yet on the 20's Plenty, when you hear obviously how it's going in Wales and how it's been received. And the money it costs to do that. I don't think it's in the council's medium-term financial plan at the moment, but I think the engagement should be something that we're looking at fairly soon, and I would encourage that. Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, your mic's not working.
One, two. Can you hear that?
Yes. Yes.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, there is a proposal or a cabinet paper coming forward in January, and we're proposing to put that on the January ONS board agenda. But again, we need to agree this at our workshop. That's something we want to look at. But currently, we are assuming that will be on our work plan ahead of the cabinet meeting in January. Yeah. Councillor Trent?
Sorry to interrupt. That one's not working either.
That's working. Yeah, on the 2020s plenty subject, I know it's very controversial at the moment. I think some of it's stirred up by certain parts of the print media, but we've actually got 20-mile-an-hour zones, quite significant ones, within the pool part of BCP. And I actually wonder whether we ought to study how what's there works to put a little bit of substance to any discussion about that, because you know, I certainly had a huge list of 20-mile-an-hour zones that I submitted way back in 2014 that we're sort of did a few and then it all kind of stopped. And I gather there are other requests for 20-mile-an-hour zones within BCP already. So it's not like it's inventing something from scratch, but it's talking about introducing it in a more economical way instead of having lots of individual measures. But I think we ought to look, as I say, at how things are working where they are there. And the bigger zone is probably in the Newtown area of Poole, where it's, you know, fairly substantial and it's almost all roads in that area. And perhaps, you know, so that we take an informed look at it and not something which is fed by prejudice within the media, because I do think that it is an important thing to look at, and something which we do at least have some examples on our doorstep.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Trent. Can I suggest that you actually contact Richard Pincroft, okay, who was sort of responsible for producing the paper that's coming forward. I'm not sure if he's writing it, but he's in charge of the highways area. I spoke to him today actually about it, and you know, he would be able to probably answer those questions about, you know, what they're considering. Give you some idea as to what he's thinking is. Okay. So, yes, please go on. Yeah.
So just to get some clarity around a few of the things that have been discussed, so that we can be clear on what's going on the full plan, if possible. Your December items are set and have been on there, so I don't understand that there's any change to that. However, in terms of the corporate plan, you may like to have a discussion outside of the meeting about how members could receive that. And of course, remember, you can receive things outside of the meeting for information if you wish. In terms of January, it would be really helpful to get a clear steer on items, because we are now in November, and then members and officers can prepare for that. So I think what I have is the library strategy, the 20-mile-per-hour scheme, both of which we are expecting to be cabinet reports coming through in January. And you have an update on the ONS action plan, which would give you 3 agenda items for that meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct. Sorry. 1, 2. It works on the second push of the button. How odd. Councillor Borehead.
Yeah, the only other thing to add is I'd made a request at the last meeting about an update on Wessex Fields. We heard from the leader tonight that it is one of their priority projects, and I think she intimated that a decision was looming on it, and I think it would be good for us to take a deep dive into some of the regeneration projects early doors as well. So if it's too late for December on that, certainly January would, I think there'd be enough time.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we should list this on our forward plan anyway. not necessarily attribute a date to it, but when we do our workshop to decide what our plan is, then we'll decide at one point we'll do these. But I agree with you. Actually, should have put it on there already because you mentioned it at the last meeting. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, please.
I've made a note of that, thank you. And we discussed tonight the assurance review update coming through in April, so we can add that to the forward plan. Of course, as you said, you can change these at your workshop, but it's good to capture them now. And we've heard that that will also align to the corporate performance reporting at the same time, so you may wish to consider receiving the corporate performance report along with the assurance review update. That's just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Yes, it's still structured against the old plan. Yeah, yeah.
Your mic's not working, sorry.
Do you want to do that now? Thank God.
And in terms of your scrutiny request, we've had brief.
Is yours working?
Working. So there is a formal process for requests for scrutiny that's set out in the Constitution. You should consider them as a committee. You have to assess the value to be added by them and the resources available to you. And then you have to make a decision and give reasons if you are not going to go forward with the scrutiny request. So I think what I'm hearing here is that you're going to shift that consideration onto your workshops because that's very timely. And one of the things that I will be doing in the preparation for the workshops is writing to councillors to see if there are any other suggestions for scrutiny. So you can look at all of those in the mix. But at that point, you do need to formally decide what you're going to do with requests for scrutiny to be in keeping with the Constitution. And may I just highlight the dates of those workshops? I think you should have all seen them. I've had some acceptances, so thank you. But they are in your diaries. They will form both a development opportunity in skills for work planning in local government, which is not an easy thing to do. So I would urge you to take that up if you are able to. And of course, they would give the opportunity to input into the forward plan of the committee, which will be the end result. So the dates are Tuesday, the 12th of December, 6 till 8 p.m. Thursday, the 18th of January, 6 till 8 p.m. and Monday, the 12th of February, 6 till 8 p.m. all following a stage process for building your work programme. And there will be an online introductory session on Teams on the 22nd of November, 6 till 7 p.m. so that you can meet the people from the CFGS, Centre for Governance and Scrutiny, who will be leading this and also input into the process. That's just a plug for those, really, to put them in your diary if you possibly can. Thank you.
Okay, members, I think we've sort of done. Oh, Councillor Tarling.
I just want to point out to councillors on the DLUC website, there is a code of practice for overview and scrutiny, which is well worth having a look if you like reading that sort of stuff. Thank you.
Councillor Devon.
Sorry, Chairman, but when we've got the date to be allocated bit on here, it says business improvement districts. And to determine if we wish to have it on the work plan, but if we do want to have it on the work plan, we need to get that in because I know that the people in the bids work incredibly hard. And you can't suddenly say, oh, we've got a meeting next week. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, some of these we've taken on from the previous committees quite some time ago, and that's I've left them on there so we can consider it at our next workshop. And I take your point. Yeah. Councillor Oliver. Yeah.
It's all right. I'm new. It's fine.
You'll get there.
So one thing I think we should consider is looking into how the council engages with its residents. So I know that not a specific form of engagement, but engagement on the whole, because I'd really like to find out, as a percentage when we go out for getting input from residents, how much do we get in terms of response? How do we benchmark against other authorities as well to see what can be done to improve? What are they doing that we're not doing? One thing I often hear from residents is they don't know what's going on. They haven't had feedback that when they read in the news, we've had an engagement go out to residents, and you often see people say, "Oh, I've not been consulted." I appreciate that not everyone's going to see everything that we do, but I'd really like to understand, because I get a lot of complaints from residents, for example, of not being aware of new planning applications in a ward or something like that. But just general engagement statistics, how we compare and what we can do better in the future to actually get residents more engaged in what we're doing. And I don't mean for a specific topic, but just in general.
1, 2. Yeah, a couple of specifics. Planning applications. A number of ward councillors will actually put those out on a circular to an email address or whatever, and they'll do that. Of course, they're online anyway, so members, the public should be able to see if they have an interest. But the onus is on them to find out, rather than having it sort of delivered to them on a plate. We do. The website is quite comprehensive with regard to consultations. So if anything important comes up that the community needs to be aware of, it is there. But I do share, not that many people, I think, look at them. And it's a bit disappointing sometimes when you see the numbers of people responded to those kind of consultations, as it is disappointing when we have an election and only 15 or 18% of the population come out to vote. But I'm not sure that I think it's a shame that we don't have the BCP newsletter that we used to circulate. But then I don't know why that was stopped. Or 6 monthly, was it 6 months? Does it? Well, certainly used to get one. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking out of place, and it's not. It's not actually. It used to be issued free, delivered to every household. But I thought it had stopped. Maybe I'm wrong, but Chief Exec's going to tell us, I think.
Sorry, your mic's not working.
That's better. Okay, sorry. It's not supposed to happen to my microphone. Sorry, yes, the council news magazine was stopped some time ago. I don't think we've produced it for about not for a long time. The one that you get now is produced by another company. They use our press releases. And actually, one of the debates was, why are we producing something when the private sector is producing something with almost equal content and almost looked almost the same. But we find other ways of communicating. But that magazine, I think, was stopped. I don't know when the last edition came out. Must have been a good year ago.
Want to? How odd. Okay, I'll say it. Yeah, please, Lindsay.
Thank you. Just to say that what you've been discussing is ideal for a scrutiny request form. So if you wanted to pop that into a form and submit it, I will write out to you to prompt that. But that's the sort of thing that then the committee can consider how that could be scoped to add some value, or whether it's more of an information thing, what form it needs to take. Thank you.
Just before I come to you, Bobby, I do remember when the Shadow Authority was formed, we considered how communities could become more engaged with the council. Then there was a suggestion that we had a committee called the Listening Committee, where individuals and organisations could approach the council directly. But for whatever reason, it didn't go forward. But I think these sorts of things will be considered within the governance review that the leader was talking about earlier on, because there are still some gaps in the way that we do communicate with our communities, and I think that's recognised. I think it will take part, be encompassed within that review. Councillor Dove.
So I was just going to say there is engagement strategy actually that was released in 2021, is in place until 2024. The only thing I don't think it has is, and maybe Sophie's not here now, would be able to advise us, is how it's being changed in light of the census data, because that's the only thing that we haven't perhaps catered for in terms of whose needs we're meeting and how we're going to engage with those. But obviously, with it being in place in 2024, I imagine they'll be going out to consultation sort of next year at some point. That might be like a good time perhaps to feed in, see what's happening.
Yeah, suggest you just put in a request for, yeah, okay, thank you. Anybody else? All done? Okay, end of meeting, thank you.